Hello, everybody. Good evening and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I am Megan True, a curatorial assistant in the Department of Painting and Sculpture of Europe here at the Art Institute of Chicago. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the museum and to tonight's conversation, Gustave Caillebotte, Painting His World. This landmark exhibition reintroduces Gustave Caillebotte as a singular voice within Impressionism, an artist who turned his gaze inward, capturing the intimate world of his family, friends, and everyday encounters. Thank you for being here tonight for an exclusive look into the life and work of this singular artist. This is my first major project at the museum, and I want to express our gratitude to the exhibition sponsors for their support of this exhibition. Lead support for Gustave Caillebotte, Painting His World, is generously provided by the John D. and Alexandra C. Nichols Family Foundation. Raymond James is the lead corporate sponsor. We thank them alongside all of the other exhibition supporters for their generous support. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers for the evening, Gloria Groom, Paul Perrin, and Scott Allan. Yes. Thank you. As the chair and Winton Green curator of Painting and Sculpture of Europe and executive director of initiatives in France here at the Art Institute of Chicago, Gloria Groom has been involved in numerous major monographic exhibitions and their accompanying catalogs, including Gauguin, Odilon-Redon, Caillebotte, Renoir, Manet, Seurat, and Toulouse-Lautrec. Paul Perrin is the chief curator and director of collections at the Musée d'Orsay. He has been in charge of paintings at the Orsay since 2014 and has been the co-curator of several exhibitions, including Frédéric Bazille, The Youth of Impressionism, James Tissot, L'Amigou Madon, and Enfant le Cinéma. Curator of paintings at the J. Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles, Scott Allan is a specialist in 19th century European and particularly French art. Since starting at the Getty in 2006, he has curated numerous exhibitions, including Unruly Nature, The Landscapes of Theodore Rousseau, Manet and Modern Beauty, and Reckoning with Millet's Man with a Hoe. As we begin, a brief reminder to please silence your mobile devices. Now, please join me in welcoming our co-curators to the stage.
Thank you, Megan. And Megan is being way too modest. Megan is my right-hand person on this exhibition, so I want to just clap for her. We could not have done this without her. Invaluable. And I have the dream team here. Paul was here at the Art Institute when? You worked in our department for a little bit when you were young. And Scott and I, as you'll remember, we did Manet and Modern Beauty together. So this is really coming home, and it's coming home for other reasons too. How many of you saw the Caillebotte exhibition in 1995 here? See, I thought. So for me, it's really, really wonderful to be working with an artist that I think is just, well, we have the big one, right? But also, having done the 1995 exhibition, that's when our painting was plastered all over Paris because they were just discovering him. We kind of knew it was the artist that did the umbrellas. And since then, there have been many exhibitions on Caillebotte, and they've sliced and diced him in different ways. There have been retrospectives. So we really thought, and it was Paul's idea, a brilliant idea, and Scott's, to think about, well, there's so many men in his paintings. He really is talking about his relationships, his fraternité, this kind of ideal brotherhood. And so that was the angle for this exhibition, in which led us down the path of research and into some of the discoveries we're going to be sharing with you tonight. So just to give you an idea, we just stuck some slides together. So, how many people have seen the exhibition? Oh, good grief. Oh, good. So, okay, well, then I should also thank Sam Grassi. Samantha Grassi is our designer. And I think as you went through the exhibition, you saw that this is a different kind of Regenstein exhibition than we've had in the past. Anyway, so what we're going to do is just talk a little bit about Caillebotte's life, kind of getting into what we've learned. And then we'll open it up for questions at maybe after about 45 minutes. And so let's just get started. I'm starting. Okay, hang on. Okay, so anyway, Paris in October, it opened to 500,000 people in 3 months. Huge, huge. We won't get that here, but we're hoping we'll get something close to that, maybe half. And at the Getty, it was immensely successful and completely different palette, completely different installations in both places, but nearly the same paintings, drawings, and photographs and the things that make the exhibition really flesh out the artist and his life. And I think I should hand it to you because this is kind of how it got started. So why don't you can take the
Thank you, Gloria. Good evening, everyone. First, I want to say I'm very happy to be here today, and I also want to say how great it was to work with the Art Institute, with Gloria and the Getty and Scott. It was so we have been working on this project since 2022, and it has been a really fantastic journey together, I think. And the beginning of the exhibition, the first idea came with this. For me, it came with this painting, the boating party. It was in a private collection for a long time. It was still, in fact, in the collection of the family of the artist, of the descendant of Caillebotte, and it was bought by the Musée d'Orsay a few years ago. It was probably one of our most important recent acquisition. Really, one acquisition that clearly changed the shape of the Impressionist collection of the Musée d'Orsay, especially to represent better Caillebotte, which was, of course, a great name in our collection, but we didn't have something like that. And we really wanted to celebrate this acquisition that was made with the support of LVMH. It was one also of the most expensive acquisition we made recently. And we wanted to celebrate this. And the idea came from just looking at this painting. So you see there's a man in a boat rowing on a river near Paris. He's very elegant. He's wearing a bit strangely a top hat while he's like in a more sporting situation. It is right in the middle of the painting, facing us. We are in the boat, looking at him. He's the main subject of the painting, and there's no story, no narrative, no anecdote. The subject is this man. And we don't know who he is, and that's also something strange. It's at the same time so obvious and so mysterious. And what is the intention of the painter? Why painting this man on this scale? And the way he put us in a sort of immersive situation is absolutely new at that time. So we thought it would be a good idea to question this interest by Caillebotte at depicting the man of his time and sort of depicting what is a modern man in the late 19th century. He was himself a modern man in some ways, and he spent all his life as an artist to depict different types of modern masculinities. So that's what the beginning of the process. And then we, of course, turned to the Getty and the Art Institute to partner for this exhibition for a very obvious reason at the Art Institute, because you have two masterpieces. You have Caillebotte Rainy Day, and you have Gloria Groom. So of course we had to work together, and we turned to the Getty because they also made a very important acquisition recently. But I will let you speak about it.
Yes, thank you, Paul. And just to echo Paul, I'm so pleased to be here this evening with my two colleagues and with Gloria and her whole team at the Art Institute. The installation here is incredible, very dramatic, very theatrical and exciting, and I think it's going to be an immense success here, and very proud to see the Getty painting in the installation here. It's getting a good sort of run for its money in the public eye after having been in a sort of top secret private collection for a good 3 decades before we acquired it. It was in the 1995 show, and then it was sold soon after that to a private collector in Texas, and it remained in that collection until that collection came up for auction in 2021. And by that point, I had been at the Getty for a good 15 years, and throughout that whole time, Caillebotte was one of those artists that was always on our wish list. Our collection is still a kind of a young and small and growing collection. We have good representation of Monet and Degas and some of the other Impressionists, but no Caillebotte, and he was a really crucial linchpin figure in the movement, a real kind of dynamic, lead organizing figure in the movement. And this picture particularly was on our notional wish list. It's the cover of the Catalogue Raisonné. It's something all the art historians love to write about because it's very quasi-photographic construction. It's all about the act of looking. It really rivets the viewer in place with this, motif of the man with his back turned to us at an open window. It's a picture that's about the act of looking. And for art historians writing in the 1990s, it's all about the male gaze, and it's a sort of proprietary, commanding male gaze over modern Paris, so about Haussmannization and all of these themes that were important in the social history of art in the 1980s and 1990s. So really iconic work by the artist. And we were happy to have the opportunity to bid for it at auction. And so we were definitely primed to hear Paul's pitch for this project. It seemed like the perfect fit. And we started planning in earnest in 2022, the three of us, and which is a relatively short runway for a show like this, I should say, in terms of pulling all the loans together and putting a catalog together. So it's a lot of work in a very compressed period of time. I'll have a few things to say about this picture as farther on in the talk, but it's definitely a show that was in some ways born out of, collection strength in the case of the Art Institute and new exciting acquisitions, because there is this increased museum interest in Caillebotte in recent years. And he's an artist that is still kind of filtering into the public consciousness. A lot of his work is still in private hands, but more and more is appearing in museums. And so it's a good trend, and he's getting more global exposure just in recent years.
Yep, and since we've had this painting here since 1964, we've always known about Caillebotte, but maybe not until 1995 did we know more about him. And I just remember you were going to ask for this loan, and then I said, no. We want in. We want in. So that's why we're the last, not the least, but we are the last in this exhibition venues. So this painting left in August of last year, and it's been sorely missed. We've tried to fill the space. We had a wonderful Manet for a while, and now we have a Vuillard. But it is, so now we're at least, you can come up and you can see it. You just have to go to another part of the museum. So our exhibition has 70 paintings, so it's about the same at each venue, but the stories we're telling are slightly different in terms of the installation. But if you saw it in Paris, you saw the same wonderful works. We've been very lucky. I think we pretty much got, maybe with the exception of 2 or something, we got everything we really needed to have, because we identified, he did probably over 100 figure paintings. A lot of those were of men and women, and so we really were trying to concentrate on the best of the best so that we could show him to, the paintings that have been seen a lot, but also paintings that have never been seen. I did not know about it before we started on this adventures. Do you want to talk about what Caillebotte is known as too? Because that's sort of important to the story.
Yes, and I think maybe it's even more important in France, because he's well known in France as a great collector of Impressionism and a great donator of Impressionism to the French state and to our institutions. And for a very long time, this identity as Caillebotte, the rich, how do we say, sidekick of the Impressionists, who was helping them, giving them money, buying the work that they weren't able to sell, and making a collection and then giving it to the nation, to the French nation, had kind of make disappear his own career and his own success and talent as an artist. And what you see here is the works that are in the Musée d'Orsay's collection that come from the Caillebotte bequest. So you can see it's quite some important works for the collection of the Musée d'Orsay. So Caillebotte, as you know, died quite young. And when he died in the early 1890s, his will was made public, and in the will he was saying that he was giving his Impressionist collection to the French state. It was around 70 works. You can see some of them here, works by Monet, by Renoir, by Degas, by Pissarro, Sisley, and Cézanne, and also Manet, the balcony. It was a whole adventure to accept the donation, because in the 1890s it was still considered some kind of scandalous and revolutionary painting, especially for the French Beaux-Arts administration, and so we know Caillebotte this way. We wanted at Orsay to pay tribute to Caillebotte as one of the greatest donors to the French institution. So during the exhibition in Paris, we had a room with the whole collection grouped during the time of the exhibition. And there's a painting in the exhibition that alludes to this identity of Caillebotte as an avant-garde artist, but also an avant-garde collector. Is this self-portrait you have on the left. He is in his studio, in his apartment in Paris, and on the wall behind him you can recognize inversed because he is looking in the mirror. Is the Bal du Moulin de la Galette, which was the jewel of his collection, probably one of the greatest Impressionist works in French collection today. And it was sort of the trophy of his collection. But it was also a painting that Renoir wasn't able to sell at that time. So that's very interesting. And just to remind you also that when Caillebotte was making these acquisitions, he's very young. He's beginning to buy things to Monet and Renoir in his 20s. And he's 28 when he wrote his will saying that he wants Impressionism to enter the Louvre one day. And so that's something to have in mind. He was a visionary artist, but also a very visionary donor and collector. And in his donation, there is no work by himself. So when he died, his friend, his brother, Martial, we will talk about him later, thought that it would be important to have one work by Caillebotte to enter the French collection alongside the Moulin, de la Galette, all the other Impressionists. And so they decided they chose this painting to represent Caillebotte in the French Museum in the late 19th century. And this work, it's interesting because it was considered at that time when Caillebotte died as his masterpiece, but it's one of his first painting. It's the first grand painting he's making. He wants to show this painting at the Salon, the official art exhibition at that time. And it's a manifesto of modernity. The subject is new, working class men from Paris, depicted during their work with a very strange perspective and composition, with a very also a very beautiful depiction of light and reflection. And so it was really his first masterpieces, and it was rejected by the jury of the official salon. And that's why a year after he joined the Impressionist group, which were of course much more open to this novelties.
So I mean, there's a lot of wonderful things we can say. The floor scrapers at the beginning of Caillebotte's career, and just the setting of that painting, which will kind of get us to the next slide, is very important. They're not, these workmen aren't preparing the floor in any old room. They're preparing the floors in a newly constructed studio space for Gustave that his father had built for him in the family home. And so in some direct way, he's connecting his labor as a painter, his future labor as a painter, who's just at the outset of his career, with this sort of the relatively anonymous labor of these workmen who are treating a plain surface with tools, a horizontal surface with tools. Caillebotte is in some ways elevating them by depicting this on the vertical plane of the canvas, and at least in a metaphoric way, connecting his work with the tool of the paintbrush on the plane surface of the canvas with what they're doing on the floors of his studio. So it's a kind of inherently elevating and dignifying presentation that is like literally giving visibility to the kind of labor that is normally invisible, that's performed before a room is occupied and used. And I think that one of the running themes through the show and in Caillebotte's life is his interest in artisanal labor and working men and various trades. And even though he came from a sort of independently wealthy background, he had a kind of artisanal conception of his own activity that, in his mind, gave it a kind of dignity and virtue, I think, and allowed him to have certain feelings, I think, of fraternity across class with working men who also did things with their hands. So it's a very pointed choice of subject for his debut picture, which was intended for the Salon, which was a venue which, at this point, yes, there are themes of labor being depicted, but it's peasants out in the countryside, it's Jean-François Millet and this genre. But to have men in the city, urban laborers, this was kind of a new domain for painting. And I think one of the things that I think has become very apparent for us and that we emphasize when we give tours of the show is how innovative Caillebotte is with his iconography. And it's not simply that there's a kind of preponderance of men and that he's painting his world, and all of that is true, but in doing that, he is discovering new subjects for painting and introducing new subjects into the history of modern art and doing something that's different from his Impressionist peers. And it starts right at the beginning with this picture.
I remember one time you showed a Degas ballet, remember, and you compared it to this because Degas was doing his ballet dancers, but this is choreographed too, and it's just so interesting. And another one of the through lines is how close everything is to him. It's his house.
Yes.
And you'll be in the exhibition, you realize that he's just painting his world, but his world happens to be where he lives and the blocks around it. It's not a far-ranging world. Yeah, and that's a perfect example.
The way he starts out is really interesting. I mean, so just maybe back up a little bit with some of his family background. His father, Marshall, is in the textile business and makes a fortune in the 1850s, primarily through exclusive government contracts to supply bedding to the French army. And in the early 1860s, Marshall and his partners liquidated their company.
You have to kind of hold it up, otherwise you can use ours.
My mic is fluctuating. I'm sorry.
I think you have to sort of put it up like
is that better?
Rockstar.
So they liquidate their company. Marshall realizes a huge fortune, and he makes a lot of investments in land and real estate, both in Paris and outside of Paris. There's a large area of farmland he buys. He buys a summer property for the family, which we'll get to. And he buys a very large parcel of land in the 8th arrondissement, which is kind of a gentrifying, redeveloping area of Paris where a lot of new money is going. And he, in pretty short order, has erected there a huge palatial residence that occupies an entire kind of corner of a block in the 8th arrondissement, not far from the Boulevard Malesherbes and the Parc Monceau. And that is where Gustave, when he's about maybe 18, 19 years old, he moves into this palatial house with his family. And this is just as he's developing his first inklings as an artist. And his first serious figure paintings are all sort of, or most of them are set in the family home. And it is those paintings that he showcases at his public debut in the 1876 Impressionist exhibition, which is the second Impressionist exhibition. At that point, he's been invited by, I think, Renoir and Degas and others. He's gotten to know them. He had spent a little time in the atelier of Léon Bonnat, an academic painter who was quite close with Degas, actually, and so that might have been one of the points of connection that kind of led Caillebotte towards the Impressionists. But these two pictures, which opened the show here in Chicago and also did in LA and in Paris, show Caillebotte's two brothers, his youngest brother Marshall at the piano. He's studying at the Paris Conservatory at the time and becomes something of an amateur composer. You can buy CDs of his music today. They're pretty good. And then in the Getty painting, is the middle brother René standing in a third-story balcony in the house. These rooms are probably adjacent to one another, and so it's like his brothers in their respective rooms, presented at these kind of very bold, up-close angles. They're kind of static in the sense of, this is just a man standing at a window, but with all of these forceful diagonals that connect domestic interior to streetscape beyond. It's very visually exciting and dynamic picture where, like, he's clearly an artist at this stage in his career. You'll notice the brushwork and stuff doesn't appear impressionist. I heard some people in the show today saying that these don't look like impressionist paintings, and that is the correct response. They don't really. He's just joining the group. He's really seeing himself as an avant-garde modern realist. And he's not presenting these pictures as family portraits. He's presenting them as generic modern life scenes with generic titles like Young Man at His Window, Young Man Playing Piano. And he's very much in tune with what critics in the mid-1870s are calling for in terms of modern realism, which is getting away from all the academic formulas and the studio routines, getting out there into the modern city and depicting contemporary individuals in their characteristic attitudes, in their normal outfits and clothing, and in their familiar everyday living environments. And there's an infinity of subjects out there in modern Paris to discover. And that's, Caillebotte takes that directive very literally, and he's like, I'm you, my brother, at the window. Like, he's just going to document his immediate world, and that really sets him apart as, at the leading edge of modern realism. And at this moment, the idea of Impressionism as a distinct thing, the definitions are still in flux, and there are a lot of kind of quote unquote realists exhibiting with the Impressionists. They had common cause in their embrace of modernity, but what you'll see in the show as you go through is that very quickly, Caillebotte is clearly looking at Monet and Renoir and responding to their brushwork and their palette. And that becomes immediately apparent in paintings he's doing 2-3 years after this point. So, in terms of, him starting from a place of family property, because that's the foundation of kind of privilege and wealth. That's what forms his viewpoint. And it's true with his first important plein air pictures too, which are largely all set on a river that ran alongside the family's summer estate in a place called Hyères, just to the southeast of Paris. It's been restored and can be visited today as the Caillebotte property, and it's fabulous and worth a visit. But a lot of his boating pictures, which are among his most iconic, are set on that little river. And so I think Paul has maybe some more things to say about these pictures.
No, you're right. I think they're very interesting because of you can see some kind of shift in his way of in his technique, because also he's embracing new subject, outdoor subjects. So he's looking very much as how Monet and Renoir and the people who is collecting works. I mean, he has Monet paintings in his home. He has Sisley, Pissarro, and the other around him. So he's really looking at them, but at the same time, he is doing something very singular, unique, and I think you can really see it when you compare, for example, the Caillebotte with the Renoir, which is the two are about boating, about canotage, but in a very, very different way. Renoir is really looking about the social interactions, not really about the sport. It's more about like men and women flirting. It's a kind of a public space. It's landscape, but it's a public space. You can imagine that there's a restaurant nearby, and there's it's also a competition. You have like professional in the background. On the other side, Caillebotte is almost showing something that is a private space, because it's the river which is at the end of his property, alongside his own garden. It's more a sort of promenade than a real competition, and there is nothing about the flirtatious subject, about the sort of joyful and people enjoying the life outside. It's really more focused on the energy of that man in the boat, and how Caillebotte wants to innovate with a point of view, a framing, and to give the viewer the sense of being in the boat with that man. So it's really interesting, I think, to compare these two, to understand how Caillebotte is really part of this group of young men who are and women who are inventing the sort of painting of modern life, but he has really his own way to do it.
I sort of love the fact that he's just kind of taken off his coat. I mean, Caillebotte has a confidence about him, and so he's showing a man, just thrown off his coat, happens to keep his top hat on, because why not? But he's just, he's fashionable, but he's also very confident, and that's another through line with Caillebotte. You'll see a lot of men with their hands in their pocket, that he's of a certain class, he has a certain sense of himself, and he's comfortable with that. And he's comfortable showing workers that are working for him in his home, and and it's sort of a wonderful. I don't know. I feel in his paintings that he's risk taking, but at the same time, it's his world. I mean, he has a control thing going that is good. I'm not saying it's bad. Anyway, in the exhibition, you'll see a map. Please look at it if you know Paris at all, but. We've just tried to mark out again what I was saying, that Caillebotte's world is very, very insulated around the Opéra, around the Gare Saint-Lazare, the Pont de l'Europe, the paintings that you see in the exhibition. He's never more than, we went 2 summers ago, Scott, Paul, and I, we did the Caillebotte, retracing the steps of Caillebotte, because it still exists. And we didn't go very far. We kind of went in a circle. Really? It was hot. It was sticky. It was like today. But it was, there it is. So there's the Pont de l'Europe. So this is before the Eiffel Tower. This was the technological, masterpiece of its time. It's an X-shaped bridge, which he doesn't give you that information, but it's a more complex bridge than you're seeing. He's showing just a fragment of it. This is blocks from his house. And he crosses this on his way to cafes, to where he's going to paint our painting, Paris Street Rainy Day. And it's this kind of love of the city, but also comfortableness within the city. This was a bridge he would have grown up watching go up. So it's the scaffolding, everything that was going on. He's now part of that city, and he's showing it with these, again, fascinating, I think, is that, sorry, I just lasered somebody. The different, I told you I not to do that.
We talked about this, Gloria.
We talked about this.
Don't do that.
Somebody did this in a lecture we went to, and I said, I hope I don't do that, and I just did it. But, again, looking at the Gare Saint-Lazare, looking at what is this new phenomenal bridge with these different classes of people, this is we think, a self-portrait of the artist, one of the only, probably the only genre painting that he inserts himself into, probably a painter, at least a worker, with the soft cap, and then another smocked gentleman in a military. So, I mean, there's lots of different kinds of people that he's letting us know. It's not too ambiguous. He's saying this is this, comfortable in the city.
One thing, you mentioned our walking tour, and one thing that becomes very apparent when you're on like the Pont de l'Europe and these other sites is how exaggerated this space is in the paintings. And how the distance is, and it's
like
it's
you
very,
do with your iPhone.
It's very distorted, and it comes like the diagonals are way more dramatic. The perspective, incredibly dramatic and exaggerated. And to me, anyways, these paintings, you feel how yes, this is Caillebotte's Paris, but also how kind of strange and unfamiliar it was for people experiencing, like this is the first generation of people experiencing this brand new city. Like there's none of the old medieval Paris in Caillebotte's streetscapes or old historic monuments. It's really up-to-minute brand new Paris that has gone up in his lifetime, as you said. And part of it is like, yes, I'm confident and I'm taking like pictorial ownership of this new part of the city, which is my world. But also what a strange and alien kind of experience this new modern urban environment is. And I think that some of that is, you feel that in the pictures.
That's why he needs that dog, to bring it back to reality. And in the exhibition, we just want to make clear that he does these. These are not one-offs. These are not à la prima. These are not plein air paintings so much. This is the result of drawings and sketches and nearly finished compositions into the final composition. And I love that series because it's so almost like shots in a film series where you really see him working out who's going to get to stay on the bridge and who needs to leave. And then for our painting, I think it's wonderful that we get all of these are from private collections. All the drawings are from the descendants of Caillebotte. So, they're going to go back into those collections. But they're sort of wonderful the way he's just observing the way men climb up a curb, the way they are under their umbrellas, and just how they move in the city. The city is the stage, and of course that leads us to our. I know we're running out of time, so I'm racing through our painting. You can see our painting anytime, so we're not going to talk about that. No, we want to get further than that. So this is his culmination, the most people he's ever painted into a painting, and the last time he will do a painting of this scale, 8 feet by, or 7 feet by almost 10 feet. It makes you appreciate what we have here, because it really is what you were saying, that immersive that you got with the floor scrapers. Here you're getting it with the city, that you're just going into it, and he's exaggerating those spaces. And I'm sure a lot of you have gone to this intersection 2 blocks north of the Gare Saint-Lazare with your umbrella. We did it recently, and those buildings still exist, but that space is much more truncated. It is not this huge piazza that you're seeing in this, but it's there. And that's the other thing about Caillebotte's Paris, that it still exists. He lived in a wealthy quarters, and it's the Paris we know today, the Haussmann Paris of the 6th floor apartment houses and these broad boulevards and these intersections. I'm just going to go quickly. We wanted to bring up the difference in what color does to this painting. So in Paris, they had it on this beautiful periwinkle blue. And at the Getty, they had it, what would you call that? What did you have it on?
We were calling it oxblood.
Oh, I wouldn't call it that. I would call it
But the official painting name was Chestnut, I think. But
chestnut sounds better than Song de Boeuf. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, but it changed it. We were noticing it, that in Paris it was very crisp. And when you saw it at the Getty, it had more of an old master feel, more like a salon painting, more like something that you would see at the official salon. It just changed it. And Megan and I had planned on making our painting on the blue that we always have it on, but maybe a silvery blue. But after seeing the Getty painting, we just thought, we need to play around with it. It'll return to 201. It'll be back on this color because we're not going to change that color. But so we put it on the white wall with the surrounding. I don't know what it is. Do you remember the name of it? The name? River Rouge. Oh, that's sort of nice. Red River. Okay, all right. And it does change it. I mean, it really does change the way the background, the silveriness, the crispness or not crispness. It's just kind of interesting. So, did you make this one? Did you make this slide?
Yes, I did.
Oh, yeah, okay. I couldn't remember who sent it. No, I got it on my text this morning. I couldn't remember who sent it to me. So there you go. The three faces of
French,
Paris.
our French flag, you can see it.
I didn't know it was River
Bleu, Blanc, Rouge. Bleu, Blanc, Rouge, of course.
River Rouge.
But I think it's what this says also. It's not images, it's paintings. And Caillebotte made very meticulous and purposeful choices of colors for each of his paintings. And when you change the background, you change some kind of something in the painting. So it will highlight the blue, it will highlight the yellows, the red, the white. And so you can see how this painting, of course, reacts to what is around them because they were so carefully prepared, and especially a painting like that. The title of the painting is Rue de Paris, temps de pluie, like a rainy day. So it's really about the light, how the light of a rainy day affects the street, affect les pavés, the cobblestones, with the and it's also interesting because it's all about reflection. The same with the floor scrapers, the same with the piano, the same with many things. Here, all the floor of Paris is just, because it's wet, reflecting the light of the sky. So it gives a very intense, luminous aspect of the painting. And you can see that, of course, it's about Paris, it's about the city, it's about the people in the city, but it's also a very strong and precise effect of light and painting.
Well, I mean,
which is what makes him an impressionist.
Yeah. I mean,
and sadly, we don't know who these people are either. I mean, the two most handsome men in the exhibition, we don't know who they are. That's so sad.
If you have some ideas, I don't know.
Yeah, early. So anyway, just to show, so that became our palette. So we dumped the blue that we were going to use and ended up with that palette. And so we only have about 7 more minutes. So and we have about 20 more slides. So what are we going to do? We get caught up in this. What are we going to do? So we're just going to buzz through this. Okay, you want to talk about balconies? Because this is the second home.
Well, yeah, just to say very quickly, I mean, so Paris Street Rainy Day and the Pont de l'Europe painting, I mean, they're some of the only, like, truly pedestrian level streetscapes that Caillebotte does. In 1878, when his mother dies, soon after that, Caillebotte and his brother, they sell the family residence in the arrondissement, and they move into a kind of bachelor brothers apartment right behind the Paris Opera on the Boulevard Haussmann. And one of the novel features of this apartment building and many of the new Haussmann era apartment blocks on the upper stories is a continuous wraparound balcony. And this gave Gustave all kinds of interesting new vantage points on the modern city, and he immediately took advantage of that balcony to portray various friends looking down on these kind of plunging perspective views of the boulevard. And it's totally, they're totally innovative. And he saw the potential immediately. This was an area where he was ahead of Degas, who was all about the innovative viewpoints and angles. And he caught wind of what Caillebotte was doing, and he was like, I heard what Caillebotte was doing. And he was envious, a little bit jealous and irritated because Caillebotte got there first. And then he also did some really plunging views straight down onto the sidewalk, and which are totally radical.
Should we show this?
Yeah, let's.
Well, I think this was just to remind us that we can still find Caillebotte's Paris. So thanks to Paul, we talked ourselves into the bank, the Société Générale. I'm on the balcony. I got to be there. And right across the street is the Galerie Lafayette, which wasn't there at the time, but I mean, that makes it even nicer. And this is what, Scott, you were talking about, that plunging view that he does well before any of the photographers. And that's the way it looks today. So I'm up there taking a shot of the kind of street architecture. Should we just blow through this one and go to the next quickly?
Yeah,
Scott?
we could just say, because this is
2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes. Okay, so painting his world, a big part of Caillebotte's social world are his male friends, most of them bachelors like himself, mostly affluent bourgeois. And these men were the focus of a lot of research that we did for the catalog. There's a lot more kind of biographical information that we unearthed. We wanted to get a better sense of who these men were, where they lived, what kind of professional activities they had. And so we filled out a bit more of a picture that helps bring some of these portraits to life. I love the way that Gloria and her team have displayed them in this sort of inner circle around the chamber of nudes. Very, very, very effective. But the interesting thing about a lot of these portraits is that they are staged in the Caillebotte brothers' apartment, rather than these men's various apartments. They're on Caillebotte's turf. He's sort of putting them on interesting armchairs and couches and subjecting them to his sort of pictorial experiments. And there's a kind of a quirky, idiosyncratic energy to a lot of them. In this case, his friend Richard Gallo, who he's put on this wonderful divan draped with this very flamboyantly decorated pattern. But the man presents as rather tightly buttoned up with his short cropped hair. He's holding his chest rather close. He has an air of some impatience. He's been reading the newspaper and has been kind of like interrupted by Caillebotte. You feel the dynamic between the men in a painting like this, and Caillebotte's clearly having fun with the juxtaposition of the incongruity of this man in this setting, and some of the personality and the character comes out that way.
I think we have to kind of end here because we ran out of time. It's 6. Can we go a couple more minutes? Okay.
Oh, we have question time.
Okay. All right. I didn't know. I'm supposed to.
Well,
okay.
The Bezique game is
I'm
perfect.
terrible as a host, huh? Yeah, the Bezique game is important. So, Paul, this is...
No, maybe just a few words, because it's one of the masterpieces of the exhibition, and it's one of the most ambitious works also made by Caillebotte after the street scenes, very complex in its composition. But regarding the theme of the exhibition, what is, I think, very striking is how from something very close to him, very intimate, I mean, it's not professional models he hires to stage some kind of modern situation. It's his brother, his friend in his apartment, and he's looking at them playing a game. And from this, he makes a grand work of art. And I think all Caillebotte also is here, like what you see in the exhibition is something very intimate to him. So at the same time, it's emblematic of modernity, but at the same time, it's also a way for him to show to the world kind of in a very public way, because this was showed to everyone in Paris, his life, what it was to be a man of that time. And there's a kind of probably, I don't know if he's sort of proud, or there's some kind of affection also in these paintings, because he's enjoying the company of these men, he's enjoying his way of life, and he kind of says that the way we live at that time in the 19th century is worth a grand painting. We don't have to paint anymore gods and goddesses and mythology and other things. We can just take ourselves as subject, and it can make a great work of art. And you can see, of course, the same with these scenes, which are really people that were probably very close to him. Even also with the nude. I don't know if Gloria, if you want to have a word.
Well, she's certainly not a Venus. No, he's definitely far from mythological. No, this is one of the great paintings in the exhibition, I think, besides the game of Bezique, simply because of its rawness, of its total. She is caught in she's very vulnerable all the way around, and it's really about the divan, isn't it? But also, it's also about the immediacy. So you see the waistband, you see the marks left by her corset or her waistband, so you know that she has just undressed. And this is a very, it's like an impressionism of the moment. This is an of the moment pinning down in this great, big painting that he never exhibited, but obviously is quite ambitious in terms of his scale and the finish that he gives to the divan. And then I think we'll go through that. You want to finish with that? Yeah. Why don't you?
I think kind of the exhibition is
it's the climax of the exhibition.
Even here centered around this news. And I mean, they are probably some of the most daring work he made during his whole life, and they are probably some of the most daring male nudes of the whole 19th century. And they are some kind of they are very unique. And I think when you visit the exhibition, even if you have seen in the exhibition, when you arrive at that point in the exhibition, you have seen so much great works, the street scenes, the floor scrapers, the boating scene, but there's still some kind of shock when you enter this room, because it is so different, this is so new, this is so unusual for that time, and at the same time beautiful, shocking. You can sort of, how do you say malaise in English? Like, you can be uncomfortable, or you can be very comfortable looking at them, depending on who you are, what you like. But there's a kind of something he achieved here, which is probably the same thing I was saying before. He's just to show a moment of his life, because this is probably someone who is posing, but in a way, he talks about himself here. This man who is like drying his back is probably in Caillebotte's own bathroom, and so it's a way to also to show that if you think about the artist, my intimacy, this moment of my life can be a big painting. You can see the size of this painting, and that's probably what makes this work so important in the history of art.
Yeah, I think we will end with that. I sort of love that. What do you want to do? You want to end with that? I think we should.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, this is still a moment where to have a nude, there's typically some mythologizing, historicizing, exoticizing pretext, and all of that is stripped away, and it's the most intimate and immediate kind of pretext. It's really a realist statement, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, for me, one of the most shocking things about that painting is the cold, harsh lighting, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just the fact of the nude and like the immediacy of the nude, but also like the palette and the lighting. Like there's nothing idealizing or prettifying about it, right?
And it's later than the nude on the couch, the divan, all about the divan. I mean, this is a couple of years later, and I think he's really become very confident. I mean, when you look at the strokes in that, I mean, he is just going for it, the gestural quality. It's an amazing painting, and we're so happy to have it in our inner sanctum of nudity. So we're going to end here because we're never going to finish otherwise. We could go on forever, as you can see, but we can take a couple of questions. And I thank you so much for coming tonight and hope that you'll come back again.